Welcome to Excelsior 32, the online news source for the Excelsior Project from the New York Council of Deliberation.
I want to remind all the brothers that while we thank you for joining us tonight for the Excelsior Project's presentation from the New York Council of Deliberation, Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite Northern Masonic Jurisdiction, please remember that the experiences, comments, opinions, and views shared on this program are those of individual Freemasons and do not necessarily reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, concordant, or appendant body. Now, having gotten that little piece of legal work out of the way, tonight we have the incredible honor of presentation of illustrious James Gregg. He's a brother of the 5th and 7th Manhattan Masonic District, as well as Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite Valley of New York City. He's currently the Grand Sword Bearer of the 5th Manhattan Masonic District, the District Deputy Grand High Priest of the 2nd Capitular District, and Deputy Zone Commander of Morton Commandery Number 4. He was elected Sovereign Grand Master, General of the 33rd and last degree, Honorary Member of Supreme Council in 2021. James comes from an extensive background in studying film and theater, received his Master's of Fine Arts from Florida State. Upon graduation, he was called to New York by the Julliard School and has been with the drama division at Julliard ever since. He's produced over 850 theater projects and films for the school for the 1st through 4th year students and the occasional alumni that come back. In the 23 years he has worked at the school, he's been faculty to 2 drama classes each year, mainly a production class and a culture initiative. Both classes were created by him and wonderfully received by the school. He's been a mentor to future directors through the student-initiated projects, of which he fully produced over 93 different shows, in both theater and film. When asked about what he likes most about Julliard, he states, "The best I can say is that they have been like a family. The faculty are incredibly close, students are wonderful to work with, and they're pretty talented as well." James has been married to a most incredible woman for 13 years, Donna Kaufman, who's both a social worker working with autistic children by day and a gymnastics instructor by night. Their household is always incredibly busy, I'm told, but one day they will retire to Bali, Indonesia, and at least that's what Donna insists will happen. So without further ado, I present to you illustrious James Gregg.
All right. Well, illustrious and brothers, illustrious, distinguished, sublime princes, brethren all, good evening. I first want to just thank the Excelsior team, the Council of Deliberation, as well as each brother present today to ask me to speak. It is truly humbling. Second, just thought I'd first talk about what it is I was asked to discuss. My name is James William Gregg. I've been trained in theater my entire life. In undergrad, I did much on stage, as well as film and commercials. And in graduate work, I received my master's in fine arts in directing. Upon graduation, I was called up to the Julliard School, and as Sublime Prince, Brother Flehan mentioned, I've been there for 23 years, and they very much are like family. Now, my job has changed in many ways since I entered the school, but I continue to offer 2 classes, and both classes were created by myself, and I just find just truly rewarding. Ultimately, now I do produce over 34 plays and between 3 to 5 films a year for the 1st through 4th year students at drama. I became a Mason in 2010, and I've enjoyed working in collaboration with all the brothers in all bodies of the craft. Generally, I'm a ritual director in Blue Lodge, Chapter, Cryptic, Commandery, and in the Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite of the New York City Valley. Broadly, I just enjoy the trenches. And honestly, I like to work. But there are levels to how we bring a ritual degree to life. You know, tonight's session is my interpretation of the empty space. That space in which we feel what it is that we are trying to present. The space in which we try to elevate. The space in which we try to fill with deep resonating words. I considered doing a small lecture on how degrees have been mounted over the years. Part of that inspiration has been wrapped in the opportunity of seeing some amazing theatrical spaces which would stage degrees with ease and splendor, lighting, and special effects. I recall seeing a Scottish Rite Room in Albany, and I think many of you have probably seen it. It's on the top floor. It has a small theater like it was from 1930. The backdrops are these like just painted wood backdrops that are still on the old pulley system. The electric system is like from 1950, with the circuits being two large levers that would ultimately probably illuminate 2 footlights on the front of the stage. So impactful. It did recall to me just in that space how we work here at Julliard. But my favorite, in all honesty, is really seeing the second year's work, not the 4th year fully produced shows that has all the accoutrement. It really is about the second year, because the second year, it's studio work, and you cannot hide. You cannot hide behind costumes and linen. You cannot hide behind a set. You're not illuminated and in shadow. What you are doing is fully representing exactly what you are there to do. And that is to tell the story. And that story is incredibly interesting because it's the space between the 2 actors that's electric. And that is kind of what we see in many of the degrees. We don't really hide behind much, but what we present are those words. What we present is that feeling and that electricity between 2 individuals. And that is hopefully what I hope to dive in today and really kind of explore. Now, I may ask Sublime Prince Peter and illustrious Brother Cliff for my next lecture for the Excelsior series to really explore the history of those presentations in the various valleys around the United States. But to keep focus, that will be at a different time. Tonight, I felt this was an opportunity for us to talk how we plan, how we prepare, how we rehearse and mount and perform the many degrees each year. Now, I will be transparent. I do have strong feelings about process. I have even higher feelings regarding expectations. What I hope to discuss today is not ritual direction, because holistically, we have a representative in each of our valleys to do that. I hope to talk about today that next level of delivery, both in its ideal as well as in its tempered practicality. Now, in meditating about what and how I would discuss today, I understand that this topic is just difficult to convey. I don't just want to talk at you for our time together. For much of what I do is directing the visual picture and making adjustments. I look at angles. I look at sight lines. I listen to actors and I ask questions of intent, questions of impulse. I listen to vocal quality and vocal management, and we'll touch slightly upon each of these. I listen and describe to the actors what may be more effective, but do not overtly tell them what to do. My hope is to offer insight where we take just that moment longer in preparation and listen with different ears to a rehearsal so our brothers deliver a rich, textured, embodied portrayal that may elevate our understanding and give insight or dimension to what we see and experience. Now, I'm going to touch upon topics and probably move more quickly than I would like to, just to ultimately give you a sense of an overarching process. If you have questions or if you'd like me to explore a rabbit hole, please write them in the chat. If I can, I'll try to integrate them as we go. but honestly, it'll probably be for a Q&A afterwards. So let's start. It's interesting that we call Masonry our craft. Very similarly, actors refer to their artistry as their craft as well. Now, in many instances, I constantly develop the actor's toolbox. And in relation, I hope to offer a few tools in your toolbox as well. At least things to think about as we approach our next rehearsal. But at this point, I have to ask, who is your team? Now, that's a very important question. We think we can do it all, but the honest answer is you can't. And it goes back to that leadership moment. As in leadership, mounting a degree is best when a team assembles. A director, a stage manager, lighting, music, props, costumes. Now, if you can get a stage manager to assist you or understand that then if you don't, you need to be your own. Someone, preferably a team, to assist with setting up and breaking down. Degrees are not just about the degree. How do you get into it and how do you get out of a degree means a lot. This is important to think about. And as you think about that, you formulate your team and rely and trust your team. You should have someone to ensure music and lights, but these are production moments. They lift the degree and enrich what it is being performed. Having a plan for costumes, which should reflect character, position, and alignment. Formulating a plan for props and the essential elements that make the degree work. Now, someone should help with this. Ultimately, I recommend a director in training, someone to share with him and how you do things. Because again, as in leadership, you're always training your replacement. But make no mistake, directing a degree is leadership in motion. Now, when we look at the first degree of Masonry, there's a definite and distinct pattern. There's an entrance, a preambulation, a challenge, an obligation, a reveal, a confirmation, an explanation, and inspiration. Now, the explanation I see is the Q&A, the historical, the working tools, the Bible presentation, and the inspiration I see as the charge. When we look at the different degrees of the ancient accepted Scottish Rite, our degrees follow a different trajectory, and quite honestly, they extend to more of a theatrical presentation that expresses specific moral ideas. The arc of our scenes now present a more traditional inciting incident, which leads to conflict, resolution, and an ultimate denouement, and focuses on a protagonist-antagonist issue and resolution. Many degrees seed this within a degree proper. For example, the 32nd degree begins in one way and moves quickly to a drama, which then in turn moves back to our degree format. Another example is the current 4th degree, which we now presents an established scene with workers of the temple, which builds on what a 3rd degree Mason knows in his heart. To the observer, the scene offers familiarity with differences, but it's familiar nonetheless. But it is workmen in Solomon's temple, and our main protagonist is Hiram Abiff. We are given insight into his character as he connects with the workmen, and further moral delivery as he prays to the grand architect of the universe. The scene crescendos with the ruffian moment. Interestingly, an obligation is offered, but it is at the beginning. Otherwise, it is more of a vignette. When we look to mount a degree, our first course is to read the degree several times. I call this the breakdown. And yes, you might know it, but if you want to direct a show, it is necessary for you to know the words intimately. I write questions and personal highlighted moments in the margins that I may want to highlight in some way. Now, that doesn't mean it will happen. It just means that if all goes well, I may want to lean into a specific moment. I do write questions, actor moments. I look at the arc of what the actor is saying, what he needs to establish, what he needs to highlight, what he needs to leave the audience with. Also, questions of hierarchy, of which Masonry hierarchy is present in all degrees. Whose scene is it? What are they doing and where are they going? What is the conflict? For conflict makes a scene interesting. What choices are being made? And then I ask, what related task might a character do? And how does this activity reflect his character? In the fourth degree, the task of the workman is working in various elements of constructing the temple. They have tools. They have a goal. Tiling using tools. These activities further the scene and helps in giving a depth to the scene. Now, as a note, any related activity that a person can focus on and do in the scene really helps a young performer. An activity takes a performer out of their head and out of their anxiety and lets them focus with intent. People then start talking with people, not at them, but to them. Pay attention to the vocal quality. There is a practical side of, can I hear you? There's also an artistic side of what you are highlighting and what are you driving to. How does passion and intent affect what you say? Ritual has a tendency of syncopation and of monotone delivery, and be aware. So all of these thoughts are thrown into the margin, what activity, etc. And then I look to envision how this degree lands in a space that I'm given to perform in. Is the degree a thrust theater? Is the degree a lodge room? Is it another venue? Is it a farm degree outside? Where is the audience? Now, currently, I'm actually looking at the 29th degree and how it can be offered in a different but impactful manner. I'm really honestly looking at how we might possibly do it in the round. And I'm not sure yet, not sure it'll work. For in the 29th degree, this is a degree that has two moments, a lodge setting, and then it turns into the Ottoman court. In thinking about this space, I try to delineate what is the Ottoman court and how we might give focus to the action of the scene. Delivering the story is always a priority, but it leads to the question, what story do you want to tell? If done in a lodge room, I look to see how we can maximize the room and the space so the prisoners are appropriately spaced out, so they're not on top of each other. If done on stage, how can we stage it without having the prisoners with their backs to the audience? How can we use angles and space so the scene is heard and understood? Now, finding the ground plan is essential. This is the sandbox by which your cast will perform. If given the correct space, the scene can soar. When I look at a space, I look at how I can create distance and force the actors to deliver vocally and to be seen. Too many times, one might stage a king at the east and have an advisor stand immediately at the bottom of the stair and speak at a normal volume with his back to the brothers and the candidates. No one hears what's going on. And all the work that has been given to that moment simply offers nothing and then disappears in the wind. Talk about, how should we say, when you look at a moment with the king in the East, you may want to think about taking that advisor, and I call it the top of the key. In other words, behind the altar. That forces the actor to thrust his voice over the altar and to the east. And as a byproduct, you're setting a circumstance that is going to have him meet the vocal necessity. That also keeps your sight lines at a very interesting place. Placement of actors, where they deliver lines, is essential. Now, before I go any further, I did want to discuss casting. And depending on your valley, casting is done in a myriad ways. Now, for the traditional degrees, the 4th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 32nd, these are usually done by officers of each body. However, this leaves many degrees that would be cast by an integrated cast of officers and members of the valley. Now, in casting a degree, talent and ability are important factors, but not the only factors. This is where nurturing our young sublime princes need to be given thought. An opportunity is something that lets membership feel they are contributing in a positive way, and the degrees are not an elite enterprise. The cultivation can be done much like we do in Blue Lodge. Start a young, unproven cast member with something small, but with a little meat on the bone. And then ask the following questions. Did he put the work in? Did he show up to rehearsal? Did he listen? Was he able to take a note? Was he a positive or a negative experience? You should know the cast, and also you should know the cast. You should also seek how you can bring new guys into the pool. Degree participants should know their role with plenty of time to give them the time needed to memorize and study. But no one's going to hold your hand. Lines need to be learned, but it's not always about the words. Blocking is not always about movement. Rehearsals and performances are about relationships and listening. Memorization should be an expectation, and attending rehearsals should be a necessity. A desire to work with brothers should be essential. If older members have done the role several times in the past, this is not a free pass to not attend rehearsals. For the rehearsals are for the cast to know what you are doing, what role you are playing, where you are, how you are heard. And there are rules to a rehearsal. There is only one director. I appreciate input, but 12 voices trying to move a scene along confuses and loosens all involved. There should be one voice. If there is a comment or concern, we privately engage or whisper. Respect the rehearsal process. Bring a pencil and a hard script. No phones. Why is that you write down blocking, you write down notes, because it's too much, too fast to pull in and remember for the next time. In a way, it's too much. So as you study your lines, you then have moments that you're penciled in for yourself to give yourself, oh, that's right. This is where I rise. This is where I move. An actor's duty is more than just lines in a degree. An actor's duty is about assisting with setup and breakdown. An actor's duty is knowing their role. An actor's duty is being off book. Now, we are by nature, we're trying to balance professions, trying to balance family and other bodies of the craft, other degrees. But in accepting a role, we enter a contract of responsibility and an agreement that we will put in the time to study and make all efforts to deliver. Now, I will say that I think it is incredibly important for degree participants to be off book, and a rehearsal schedule should promote that idea. Now, I do understand the argument when we talk about Masonry that it is a voluntary organization, and I understand and appreciate this idea completely. My retort is that by accepting a role, much like that of an officer, you accept more responsibility. You are a responsible party and cheerfully undertake what is asked. Let me say it this way. If you read Death of a Salesman, you will understand the themes intellectually, the character arc that Tennessee Williams brings to his play. If you sit at a first reading of a show with professional actors, you are offered hints at the dynamics, but not until the play is mounted on stage with actors off book and all elements are working conjunction, collaboration, does the full weight of the play wash over you. Tone, internal notes, nonverbal conflicts, and the full poetry of the play begins to resonate. So too with degrees. Reading off a script won't get you there. You give the actors nothing to work off of if your head is buried in a script. Now, the best thing I can say is, if you feel reading is the highest bar you can reach, I challenge you to try it off book. You will be amazed at what can be conveyed, and the deep meanings are more easily sourced and brought to the brothers in attendance. If memorization is an issue, call me. I'll work with you. But the reality of memorization is that it takes work and attention to what is being done. There is no easy pill for it to magically happen and something to do it for you. If you think it's important, then it'll happen. Now, a quick note on a rehearsal schedule. Really think about this. There should not be too much time given, nor too less time for all to focus on the degree. The rehearsal schedule should be about 6 weeks. There should be a plan. A rehearsal should have a start and an end time, and always respect people's time. Never go over. The thing about a plan is that you stick to it. This pays dividends in the end. This allows, and this also generates trust, and faith in people's commitment to attend a rehearsal. A read through, a staging, a full rehearsal with music, and notes the day of before the performance to quickly answer any outstanding questions is my process for degrees. I prefer one read through where we walk through the scenes and how it will land in a room. All are given direction to study lines and attend the next rehearsal as close to off book as possible. In 2 weeks, there's a second rehearsal. It's a spacing rehearsal. You set the room and you block out the scenes. This is the time that actors should ask questions, and where you, as a director, bring those questions that you wrote in the script. This is the time to ask the actors who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. These rehearsals are the funnest and really make working on a degree worth it. As a director, is also where you offer a bit of history or expand on esoteric elements of the degree. These are the rehearsals where you ask intent and follow impulses. These are the rehearsals where myself as a director notices impulses and whisper in ears to make adjustments. Now, when I was working in a York degree, I had the benefit of working with an outstanding actor opposite myself. He was a king and an antagonist, and I was a challenging king and a protagonist. It was interesting because when we worked at staging the degree, there was a lot of bubbling underneath the surface. Now, he was a king and he was sitting on his throne of his court, and around him were 4 advisors. And in the middle of this scene, there was a pause, and I made an observation and I asked why he seemed so rooted in the throne. Now, at this point, he answers, well, I thought that's what you wanted me to do. To which I responded, I sense that you want to take command of your own court. And he responded, yes, yes. And it felt right that he should get into this particular character's face and let him know who was king. It wasn't an idea that you forced on anyone. It was an actor generating an impulse and saying, you know, I need to do this for my character's sake. And this propelled us in the next scene to really bounce off each other. And when I was talking about that electricity between 2 characters, that's the energy that you want to promote. Choices. When an actor feels that he's off book and he's not thinking about the lines, he can make choices that make the scene work, that challenge you as another actor. If you're off book and you aren't worried about your lines, but now you're responding to what's being given to you. This could change on nightly. You did it more than once, it would never be the same. But you're receiving and giving back what is getting offered to you. And that is what makes the world of theater, a world of presentation, kind of worth it. But that's just the point. Person knowing their character has impulse of what that character should do. And those moments should be explored. That is why we rehearse. You know, not all impulses are correct. That's why you have a director. Those contributions don't happen in your head if you're buried in a script. Those contributions can't happen unless you're off book and in the same world as the other characters in the moment. And we must allow the creative energies to find the moment, and that can't happen when one is competing with themselves trying to remember lines or struggling with what to say. On the day of the degree, do a quick run of troubled moments. Do not look to do a run through. This will never happen. There's never enough time. Make sure that you have a setup and a breakdown team. Finally, a director's role is not to have everyone do as you say. That is not how a degree or a play is constructed, nor how it evolves. You need to decide in each moment what is important, what advice or adjustments to say, and what not to say. Ultimately, respect the work, respect the words of the degree, but ask questions. How can it better impact the audience? Keep it moving. Don't weigh it down with scene changes and a bunch of stuff. Keep it light. As a director, don't be afraid to add rehearsals if they're needed. Once all have the flow, let it flow. Don't stand in their way. That is the hardest thing as a director. When you have a vision and you cast, your show, you've pitched it, and it kind of creates its own thing. One of the hardest things for a director to do is to then step back and let it be. You can't keep tooling and working it. It is a gut check for any director, because you got to get out of the way. Actors have to be who and what they are, and the scene will have a life of its own. Hopefully, if you've done your work, it'll blossom and grow in a way or a direction that you hoped it would. Notes can happen, but keep it about the work. Know that people's capacity for more than a few notes is incredibly low. Just mention the top 2. Let the rest go, because they can't be heard. Personally, I make it clear that all notes that anyone else gives, or anyone wants to give, should go through myself and no one else. What a participant in a degree doesn't need is a dialogue on what was missed or a negative critique. We are Masons. We build people up. We don't tear them down, intentionally or unintentionally. But be careful to all the soon-to-be directors out. As a director, you are in a position that can inspire, but you can also lay down fear, frustration, and tear down confidence. You have unintended power. Understand that you are there to offer support, not criticism. You should lean things in a direction, but not make demands. Ultimately, a director needs to let the degree be what it is. Rehearsals are a time for input. Performances are a time for congratulations. During the degree, look for successes to build upon, not failures. We can't do the role for people. It is an incredible moment to allow the play to be the thing. And as a director, know that there is a moment that you need to stop and simply support what is there. Let the play resonate in your work. Play with roles given and find nuances you never expected. Just allow yourself to trust your cast and your brothers. Make choices, and this will lead you down the interesting but fruitful road. Thank you, my brothers, for allowing me to talk today about the plays, The Thing. As I said, it's very expansive, but I just kind of wanted to do a small arc of what it might be. And at this time, I'd be happy to talk through any questions or challenges you may have had.
All right. Thank you, James. That was brilliant. That was really, really good. I've got a couple of comments and questions from myself. First of all, I think the last bit on your advice about critiquing was absolutely brilliant. I mean, over the years, I've seen brothers get totally ripped to shreds by somebody who thinks they're knows more than anybody else, and rips somebody up over missing. Sometimes it was over missing a word or something to that effect. Now, there certainly are words and phrases within all Masonic ritual that absolutely have to be done perfectly.
Yeah.
But many times, in my opinion, and I'd like to hear what you have to say on it too, getting the point across is sometimes more important than getting the word, letter perfect. What's your thoughts on that?
Illustrates, there are two camps in that field of thought, and it is kind of two fists in the air, if you will, to come to blows. I really honestly have a more sensitive idea of what it means to do ritual. I see ritual in every aspect as a safe environment and as a place that you will have no better audience of that wants you to succeed, that drives you to succeed, almost so eager that they almost whisper their own it in your ear. But the challenge of ritual, to kind of take a different path, the challenge of ritual I see as fostering a refined ideal of what a Mason is. So your refinement of ritual and getting it correct, I think, leads you to an interesting Masonic path. And that's a developed path of yourself and your own enterprise. Kind of like what we say in when we're interviewing, maybe in interviewing candidates. One of the phrases that sometimes I hear is, we all are supportive and heading in upon the same horizon, and some have different speeds, but it's not about the race. It's that we're heading towards the same horizon, and that support in that journey is kind of what the enterprise of Masonry might be seen as. And that enterprise is very personal. And when the challenge of ritual happens, nothing is instantaneous, and it is a development. And it is one of those, maybe I'm in a school and it's the don't fear failure, because failure means you get up again and you keep going. But the next time you'll learn those lessons and bring them forward. And in that failed moment leads you actually to a successful moment. And it refines you, carves you almost. And in ways you need that. The devastating thing is that sometimes critiques can destroy a foundation, that you don't want to try it again, that they've taken your knees out, and now it's no longer an avenue of exploration. So I don't know. I have strong feelings. When I was a master, I made it very, very known. I'd seen it happen a few times with some really hard feedback moments with brothers. And I asked everyone, just from this point on, just go through myself, and we'll take it in, and we'll work with them in a different way. But it's not about you did bad or this was wrong. It's more like you've got some development to do, and I'll work with you. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
No, it does. It does. I mean, I basically was kind of just jumping off the fact that I like the fact that sometimes being overly critical of a brother about something, and they just don't return. And instead of being, constructive criticism, sometimes is really hard to get out of somebody. But another question for you, and I think there are some questions.
Illustrious, if I may, that can be a building block, though, in
Yes.
a bigger structure, and that block of something to work on is something that could be exciting and something that you can take ownership of. But when you're taking away blocks and you're just kind of destroying them, then they have nothing to build on.
Right. Very good. Well, listen, we do have a question. Bill Hasselt. I think Bill is from Valley of Rochester, I think. Bill wants to know, how do you feel about understudies? Do you believe they are valuable? Should a cast member become unavailable or for future casting decision?
That's a good question. My most transparent and honest answer is I find understudies to be impractical. It doesn't mean that there isn't a holistic use and a kind of moment that it would be obviously use. Part of taking on a role is commitment, and part of being a Masonry is loyalty, and part of what we do is showing up. Admittedly, there are times that can't happen. That's where we lean on the elders, if you will, or those who have been through those degrees to say, hey, can you bring it? And the pivot in the moment makes more sense to me than having someone in the barrel ready to go. It almost says that it's not important enough for you to show up because we've got someone else, psychologically. But I find it very difficult because just the resources of casting aren't always present.
Correct. Very good. I see Brother Peter Flehan has his hand raised as being very prim and proper. Peter, I think I've got you unmuted, so please go ahead and ask your question.
I am. Thank you, Lester. First of all, I
Actually,
paid an
hang on,
awful lot of money. Can you hear me?
Before you do that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here so we can people can put their cameras back up if they'd like to. There we go. Go ahead, Peter. Sorry.
So first of all, I want to say as an actor, I've paid an awful lot of money for classes that were a lot less informative than that one that illustrious Gregg I just gave. The importance between the interplay between actor and director cannot be overstated at all. One of the interesting things that you said, Brother Rick, about Masonic ritual is something that I've long believed. We have some very specific words. We can call them a script or ritual as we wish. But when we come to a certain point in life, Masonry has revealed itself to a very unique way to each one of us. And one of the ways we protect that is by insisting that it gets parroted in the way we've heard it. That's simply a human frailty. As a leader, I think you must be open to a different interpretation of the same sense and be able to let yourself understand that just because the brother in question doesn't hear it exactly the way you heard it, they may hear it differently, and that's part of the beauty of both something you can give to that brother and something you can learn from yourself. That interpretation may be just as valid, so be open to that.
Brilliant.
You know, Jim, I want to share a story with you, which I think is really, really key. I did some training up at the Valley of Portland up in Maine, and they really pride themselves on putting on really great degrees. And one of the presentations they actually did at the Maine COD, their midwinter COD, was how to put on a great degree. And one of the things I respected about these guys was there was one director, there was one cast. They took 6 months to get ready for a reunion. They used some of our video degrees, but they pride themselves on doing maybe one, maybe two great live presentations. They have a set director. They have someone who goes over language, and that rang home with me because I could not say the name Adoniram if you put a gun to my head. Could never say that correctly. Couldn't say it. All right. And it was Mark Isaacs who sat down with me and said, listen, let me break this down phonetically for you. Here's how you say it. And the other thing, that they also do up in Maine, which I think is great, and this is what I really want to get your opinion on, is if I'm playing a certain part in a degree, they just don't say, okay, Bob Seabold, you're going to be Solomon. All right. What they do is they say, okay, you're going to be Solomon because we think you'd be really good at the part, but here's who Solomon is. This is what he was about. They really get into the whole character, which I think is phenomenal. So you take on that life of that character. Do you think we don't do enough of that in Masonic Degrees or in Scottish Rite?
Wow, that's a heavy
turn off the recorder.
Well, no, I don't think we do that. And when I look at it, I don't think we do the Blue Lodge drama enough. It's incredibly important, and Solomon is very different from Hiram.
Sure.
Those two those poles in that space for the Blue Lodge drama are resonate. And I think you actually bring a very, very interesting point of view about character. When we look at the 10th degree, the 13th degree, these are moments when a lot of that is anchored in who those people are historically. But then it's the bridging the relationship and how the sons of Aaron and the interplay of Aaron and how all of those mean something.
Yep.
I was trying to mention earlier that, the degrees are more than just the words. The words are important, but there's this moment between an actor, between that is kind of the brilliant energy that tells you character, that tells you the passion that resonates in everyone's soul when you speak. That it's hard. But back to your original question, no, I don't think we do that enough. And a lot of it is placating. Oh, you've always done Solomon before, so go ahead and do Solomon. You know the work. Let's go. A lot of it is 90% of us don't have 6 months to work on a degree, and it is trying to get it done in this very compact way, where we streamline, possibly too much, but we're trying at a hair's breadth to make it happen at every point. And when that long term thinking doesn't happen, how can we make it happen in 2 hours before the degree? There's something also interesting to say about that other energy, that dynamic, that all hands on deck moment where everyone coalesces, and that's a brilliant moment too. That in being not prepared, you actually become more prepared when it's go time.
Yeah.
And so there's no one way to go. But again, answering your question, I don't think we answered that question enough.
I think one of the things too that they're working on with one of the committees in the Scottish Rite with the actives, which these guys do a lot of work, is a group of men that are putting together a concept of a playbill, which I love. I think that's a great idea. So each one of our degrees will have a playbill where the Valley can make the playbill their own by just inserting Valley of Hudson, Valley of New York City, whatever it is. But there'll be a synopsis, if you will, of what the degree is about. And then there'll be individual synopsises of, well, who truly was Benedict Arnold? Who truly was King Solomon? So you'll get that, if this gets approved, which I hope it does, you'll get that and you'll be able to hand that out at each degree. And then one of the things I was talking to one of the men on this committee, one of the things that they're advocating, which I think is a great idea as well, is having someone stand up before the degree and say, this is the 18th degree. This is where it's set. This is what it's about. This is the gist of this degree. And this way you have a pretty good idea, you're level set on what's happening. And then that person or another person takes 5, 10, 15 minutes after the degree is over and says, hey, let's talk that through. What do you guys think? All right. How do you apply that to your own life? And really at the end of the day, I think that's what these degrees are about. Is how do you become a better person? So again, kudos to you for what you're doing. And I thought the presentation was great.
Thank you. Actually, if I could, I'd love to launch into you just reminded me of a moment in council deliberation about 5 years ago. Michael LaRocco, distinguished brother, stood up and asked, I thought, just an incredible question about marrying the degree with education. And when you're mentioning about, the time, place, etc., I'm also reminded, like in student shaped projects at Julliard, one of the grant proposals for students to get money to actually do them, we would always ask the question, well, what is there a related thing about that? And if it was a play about domestic violence, maybe it was a panel discussion after the play that we would talk about domestic violence. If it was a new playwright, inviting the new playwright in, and maybe it was a talk back after the play. In other words, what are you giving the audience beyond what just is the play? And that, in a way, I always ask myself, once a degree is done, wouldn't it be great to launch into a lecture? You know, how do we marry both the educational component with what they've seen, and how can we kind of really strengthen our pillars of understanding
Yeah.
about, what these degrees are, than simply having it wash over us. And, I don't know, I just put that out there because I was really awestruck a few years ago when Michael mentioned that in COD, and it stuck with me this entire time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't want our guys just coming up to get a stamp in a passport.
Yeah.
That's what you don't want, so agreed 100%.
That is something that's being discussed at the Supreme Council level. There's a couple valleys across the jurisdiction that have started playing with that concept. And I think there's an audience for it. I really do. I think Supreme Council leadership slowly is starting to realize that there is a great deal of interest in being educated beyond just sitting through a degree. The HGA program is doing really, really well. It took us years. They're publishing books in the Northern Masonic jurisdiction now. And this idea of the playbill and coming up with discussion questions to follow up a degree is being heavily talked about. I'm hoping that it'll be adopted. So we'll see what happens. But James, you mentioned at the very beginning, talking about the different spaces that you work with. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know where the Scottish Rite meets in the Valley of New York City. I'm assuming you meet someplace in the Grand Lodge building, but I'm not sure which room, or if you have a stage that you guys do your degrees upon, or if you're doing it in a lodge room.
Yep. It is usually in the Gothic room. But I'll be honest, part of the challenge of staging a degree in a lodge room is part of the excitement. And it is very visceral. And it is right
Blocking's a pain.
But no, in New York's Valley, we don't have a stage proper.
Okay.
And that is, kind of when I travel, I am awestruck by the resources sometimes, or just the unique stages, whether they be thrust stages or traditional prosceniums, or real old school, brilliant, small, almost nests that imagining what could be on that and what the backdrops are, is a history lesson in and of itself.
So are you familiar with a book called Theater of the Fraternity?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so this book came out in 1996.
Mm-hmm.
Will Moore was the director of the Livingston Library at the time, and I think he was a contributor to the book. And it is in the Livingston Library. I happen to have a copy right here. Because in 1996, I was working for a company up here in Syracuse called Syracuse Scenery and Stage Lighting. Little known fact, my undergraduate degree is in theater. And so I was doing stage rigging for them. I worked for them for about 16 years. But the book was commissioned as part of an exhibit that ran for a couple of years. And it was commissioned by United States Institute for Theater Technology, USITT. And basically the whole book is about the staging of Scottish Rite degrees, 100 years ago. And it's a really fascinating book. It's not terribly big, but since you're in New York, swing through the Livingston Library and see if they've got it and have a look at it. I think you'll find it very interesting. Now, you mentioned also earlier the 29th degree. I know that the Valley of New York City is performing the 29th degree at the annual session for New York Council deliberation in June. Are you directing that degree?
It's coming together. Yes. And it is coming together. I think we have a cast, and right now everyone's kind of learning the roles. And we're our first rehearsal, as I mentioned, it's usually about 6 weeks out. So it'll be just the tip of May. So
question related to that and with space. Now, if you've ever were part of a touring group, you know that every space you go into is different. Every stage is different. So you have to adapt How are you? I think you probably got a fair idea that you're going to be using you've got probably a fair idea about this, roughly about the size of the stage that you'll have at the hotel in Syracuse. And will you be directing accordingly based on a smaller space? And then
We'll
hopefully
make it
getting the
work.
guys to adapt.
Yeah, no, we will make it work. I am familiar with the COD setup. And that's part of what we were I was trying to toy with,
Yeah.
is how flexible that could be without being flexible on the other end. Again, trying to envision it maybe in a different way. But that's part of, in a way, my process.
Yeah.
It may all kind of go back to, that proper stage of the Ottoman Empire. Let's keep the lodge room as it is. And I think we have a great setup if it is that will, kind of resonate Ottoman Empire, that will resonate an emir, that will resonate, the prisoners in a moment of, how should we say, negotiation.
Right, very good.
Thanks for spending time with XLCR 32. The experiences, comments, opinions, and views shared on this program are those of individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, Concordant, or Appendant body. Until we meet again, keep on reaching higher.